It's me, Scott, with Behind the Bits podcast, and we are doing another speed round here. And I've got Wes Corwin with me. How you doing, Wes?
Doing great. How you doing, Scott?
Great. So, as you've been noticing, my last few interviews, I do a quick speed round where we get to know ourselves on the surface, and then we dig deep after we stop the live recording. And in order for you to see that, you have to subscribe to Behind the Bits podcast and listen to the whole episode. So you got to do that. You can do it right now if you want.
Click it.
Okay, thanks. Wes, I'm glad we connected. I don't remember how we connected, but I'm glad we connected.
Yep.
Some comedy page somewhere, right?
Yeah, Displaced Comedians, that Facebook group.
Okay, there we go. There we go. And I found you because you are talking about the Plano Comedy Festival.
Yes, sir. Plano Comedy.
Which I believe is going to be virtual this year. Is that correct?
Conducted entirely over Zoom. Yes, sir.
Excellent. I do want you to know that I did put a submission in, and I don't expect this podcast interview to give me any extra credit, but I do kind of expect this podcast interview to give me some extra credit. So just FYI.
You never know what's going to go into our curriculum and our score.
So tell me how this came about. I think would this be the third year for the comedy festival?
This is Plano Comedy Festival. This is the third year since it's on Zoom. We're calling it 2.5 because we did it here last year. We've been doing a festival in the city of Plano, Texas for 3 years now, just because there was a growing amount of comedy. At the time, there was a comedy club that just popped up out there, but people in Plano, I have a day job in Plano. They were still like, there's live comedy here. So we figured we'd try to start promoting like an annual event to start bringing in bigger names and make people realize, oh yeah, there's comedy that happens here. And this year, what with COVID, we were looking at not doing it because a lot of festivals have unfortunately had to shut down. Some of them announced their festival lineups and then had to postpone it for question mark. Dallas Comedy Festival had to postpone. Memphis Comedy Festival. Just for Laughs, the biggest festival in the world, just had to postpone into the future. And we were inspired by a couple things. One was Nowhere Comedy Club that Steve Hofstetter does, where he's doing all these Zoom shows and getting these names. And we were like, oh, that's super cool that because there are a number of Zoom shows that are bad, but there are a couple that are pretty good, and we were hoping to be on that side instead of the bad side. So
Steve's is real good. I've seen it, and he does a good job with it.
The Todd Barry show, with some of the technical difficulties at the top, it turned. At first, it was good because it was a train wreck, and then it eventually got good. Genuinely, it's always fun to see somebody have to work through weird stuff.
Yeah.
Whether it's a drunk crowd or a communication platform not contributing to the Wi-Fi situation.
And Steve is a pretty big get. You've got him for your headliner for the festival, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. The funny thing is he did a club here in South Bend. It's a rock club, but he did that shortly before COVID started.
Yeah.
And I was going to go see the show, but I think I was out visiting one of my kids or my grandson or something like that, so I didn't get to see the show. But I understand it went really well because I know the guy that owns the bar, so it did go very well for him.
Oh, if it's a Steve show, I imagine it went very well. That dude is impossibly good at comedy.
So as far as how you're putting this together, first of all, you've got Steve, and what are some of the other names you've got coming to the festival?
We've got an exciting thing we're still trying to work the details out on. Among the people we have announced, we've got Steve Hofstetter, we've got Kurt Braunweiler from Bob's Burgers and Conan, we've got Roxy Hayes, who has a certain number of YouTube subscribers and Facebook likes, Twitter followers. We've got Karith Foster, who's been on Comedy Central. We've got Mary Kennedy, who's been on Showtime. Just a good, stellar pair of comedians every night of the weekend.
That's great. Now, this is something that you're opening up like a regular festival for people to do submissions, like I mentioned at the top there. And a lot of the people that listen to this are obviously comedians.
Mhm.
So what do people have to do to actually give a submission for the festival?
So if you go to planocomedyfestival.com, you'll find a button that says submit to PCF 2.5. And if you go there, you fill out a form, get directed to a PayPal link. That will be your submission process. Make sure you have a tight 5-minute video and a good bio. And if you currently submissions for today and tomorrow at $10, it's going to go up to $15. And if you're in a situation of financial hardship, because I think the unemployment rate is higher than it's been many years, feel free to fill out the financial hardship form and just let us know, hey, I submitted under this name, and we will waive your submission fee.
Okay, that's great. And it's great to give comics that are trying to find something to do, something to do.
Yeah, a lot of COVID is just desperately trying to find a way to occupy the time. So hopefully the festival can do that.
And there's a few of them that they're going to the clubs and they're doing the half-filled clubs or doing outside stuff, but some of us who live in more rural areas don't have that choice, so it's great to put that out.
Totally. And I live part of the Metroplex, so there are a couple clubs I'm close to, and I don't want to do it. It's the weirdest. I thought Zoom shows were weird until you perform for an entire group of people that are sitting a table apart, all with the masks, and it's like body snatchers. It's real weird.
Yeah.
I'm not really about it.
Well, great. That's fantastic. And in the interview, we're going to talk more about how you're putting that together and all the nuts and bolts and stuff. But for the speed route, we want to learn a little bit about you.
Sure.
So are you originally from, do you pronounce it Plano or Plano?
Plano, Texas.
Plano, okay.
I went to high school in DFW. I went to high school in a city called Keller. I went to college in Austin, Texas. That's where I started doing comedy. Then I moved. My first job out of college was in Memphis, Tennessee. Was a comedian there for a year. And then I moved here for a job that was better and started doing comedy pretty heavily in Dallas, Fort Worth, and all the surrounding little cities they're in.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Mm-hmm. When did you first start doing stand-up? What age were you when you started?
I was 19 years old.
Okay, so you're a young one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And who are your influences? Who are the ones that made you want to get up on stage?
So let's see. I was a big fan when I was young of Louis C.K. Don't hold that against me. None of us knew. And I was also a huge fan of Kyle Kinane. Still a big fan of Kyle Kinane. Love John Mulaney. Especially, I've been watching just a ceaseless amount of Mulaney interviews. I'm probably more heavily influenced by Mulaney right now than anybody else. Especially during doing Zoom mics, as you write these monologues that go in weird places, you're like, oh yeah, this is very much a Mulaney voice I'm trying to do. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Did you happen to catch the Birbiglia, his new podcast, him and Mulaney doing their interview?
I need to listen to that because I know Mulaney used to open for Birbiglia. I bet that's a fun rapport. Yeah, it's
really good because the way he puts the podcast together is almost like helping him write jokes. So he comes up with premises, and John had to come up with a premise, and it was a really good interview because they talked about old times and stuff like that too. So that was cool.
That sounds fun.
So this is a little bit off the comedy thing. What books are you reading, music listening to, podcasts, magazines? What are you consuming right now that would interest anybody else or is blowing your mind?
That's a good question. That's a fair question. What am I? Let's see. Have I read anything? I've been trying to read articles. I've been trying to keep up with statistics about the pandemic, which is a whole slog in and of itself. Yeah. I've been watching all the Star Wars movies with my wife. I had watched them all before. This is exciting because we met in our mid-20s. So we largely had pop culture experiences that we didn't have any like experiences together where we saw a thing. And so we're going through Netflix and we'll scroll by something and I'll be like, have you ever seen Bloodsport? And she hasn't seen Bloodsport. We've seen Bloodsport together. We've seen Die Hard. We saw Goldfinger. Just a whole lot of like movies where she's like, I never got to see that. It's been fun. Let's see, TV shows. I started a podcast with a buddy of mine where we watch Frasier, which is a show I've never seen before. Because he's a big Frasier fan, and his last name is Frazier, and it's called Frasier on Frasier, and that is pretty much all there is. I bring like, oh, there's a well-written joke, and he's like, yeah, and then this happens, and then it's it's probably one of the only I've made a bunch of podcasts in the past, and this is the first one where somebody else has the idea, and I'm like, yeah, I'll help you produce that, because what else am I going to do? We're just sitting inside. And yeah, that's about what I'm trying to do, trying to occupy the time watching Frasier and comedy.
That's great. Isn't it great kind of going along for the ride on a podcast instead of being the brain?
I know, it's the best feeling to be like, you come up with the creative ideas, I'll put this in Audacity, and then I'll MP3 and upload it. And that's all my contribution.
I'm putting myself out there to get interviewed because I've been interviewed a few times, and I just absolutely love it because all I got to do is show up and talk. You know, I can do that. I don't have to worry about recording or levels or social media or any of that crap. I can just do it.
One of the best, when you're a guest on the podcast, there's no better response than like, yeah, the audio was off, but you were great. Like, oh, well, I brought all I could then. That's all.
And the audio is always off. It doesn't matter what you do. There's always something wrong.
Nothing you can do about it.
What comedy album or special is your all-time favorite?
That's a real challenge. My favorite, I'm a big fan of Whiskey Icarus by Kyle Kinane. Huge fan of Comeback Kid by Mulaney. There is what is that one called? How Do I Land by Kurt Braunohler is very good. Oh man, there's some. On the subject of Birbiglia, my girlfriend's boyfriend is the first special that I saw where I because he does the thing at the beginning, the act out, and it plays into the end, and it's like, oh, a comedy special can and should be like it should equal up to more than the sum of its parts. A bunch of jokes, it should be like, wow, this all fits together. So
yeah,
that was the first time where I was like, oh my gosh, comedy can be like a whole thing.
Yeah. Like a real callback.
I know, right? It was very impressive. It blew at the time. I was like, that's incredible. That's why he's a pro.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, everybody who's watching, I'm going to talk to Wes about everything about the Plano Comedy Festival and how he got into comedy and what he's been doing. All you got to do is subscribe to the Behind the Bits podcast. It's on all the apps. All you got to type in is Behind the Bits. And I think you can type my name in now because I put my name on it. So Scott Curtis, you can do that too. But subscribe, listen, tell me how you like it. Tell me what you don't like, whatever. Scott at the btbpc.com is my email. Thanks for being live.